Hello everyone and welcome back to my course Angular. Today we will discuss about services and dependency injections. Services and dependency injections. Angular is a popular web application framework that implements the principles of dependency injections to manage objects' dependencies between components, services, and modules. Dependency injection is a pattern where components or services are created and managed by a higher level entity. This allows for a more modular and flexible application design, where components and services can be easily swapped in and out, and the code is more testable and maintainable. The framework implements dependency injection using its built-in dependency injector, which creates and manages instances of the objects and services. This injector can be configured at various levels, such as the application level or the component level, to provide instances of the required services to the components that need them. In Angular, services are used to encapsulate business logic and share data between components. Services can be created using the @injectable decorator, which tells Angular's dependency injection system to create and manage instances of the service. To use a service in a component, you need to declare the service as a dependency in the component's constructor like this. As you can see, um, on the left side of our PowerPoint, this is the content of the services that I created. Basically, it's still the same method using creating components, but instead of using the ng generate C, it's gonna be ng generate S as for services. And here we created a method get message, and then it will return a string hello world, wherein in our component we access this method in the services file by injecting the data service class in our component. As you can see on the right side of our PowerPoint, there's an import data service from the data.service. And then by injecting that, we must call it and inject it again in the constructor by creating a new variable with the data type of data service. Basically, inside our constructor, we created a variable private my service with with a data type of data service, wherein after this, we can set our message or the variable message as equal to the my service that get message method. Basically, we called the method get message from the data service by creating a variable and by injecting the service file. Overall, the dependency injection is a powerful technique that allows for more modular and maintainable code in Angular applications, and services are a key part of this pattern. Because imagine if you're going to create a method, then you're going to use it in all of your components. What if you create a single file that can hold those methods, and then you can call those methods exactly the same in your components? It's gonna be much less harder for you to test the method, given that it's only a single method that can be used by all of your components. Then it's gonna be easier to maintain, given that it's only a single method wherein it will also affect all of your components already. And then as for the demonstration, or maybe to visualize how the services works, um, Example, we have a services file, and then component A is also going to use the services, component B is also going to use the services, and component C is also going to use the services. Basically, this concept of services is a sharing of a method or something that each component will always use, and it is basically common to each components, wherein the service will hold that method and then it will just hold it and let the components call it so that they can use it. And then next, here are some examples of real life application of the um, services in Angular. First of all, the API communication. Services can be used to communicate with a backend API, fetching and sending data to the server. This allows for a separation of concerns between the component and the data layer, making it easier to maintain and test the code. State management. Services can be used to manage the state of an application. This can include keeping track of user authentication status, managing the state of a shopping cart, or maintaining application-wide settings. Utility functions. Services can be used to encapsulate utility functions that are used throughout an application. For example, a service might provide functions for formatting, dates, or times, or for handling string manipulation. Shared data. Services can be used to share data between components. For example, a service might maintain a list of items that multiple components need to access, such as a list of recent search results, and etc. Third-party integration. Services can be used to integrate with third-party libraries or services, such as Google Maps or Stripe payment processing, and etc. Basically, by using services in production applications, developers can achieve a more modular and scalable application design, making it easier to maintain and update the code over time. Next is dependency injection. Dependency injection is a software design pattern that allows objects to be dependent on other objects without having to explicitly create them. In Angular, the dependency injection is used to provide components, services, and other objects with the dependencies they need to function. To use the dependency injection in Angular, you need to first define the dependencies you want to use. This is done by creating a provider for each dependency. A provider is a function that returns an object that represents the dependency. Once you have defined your providers, you can use them to inject dependencies into your components or services. To do this, you simply specify the dependency as a constructor parameter. Angular's dependency injection system will automatically create an instance of the dependency and pass it to the constructor when the component or service is created. For example, suppose you have a service called um, data service that needs to use the HTTP client service to make HTTP requests. You can define the HTTP client as a provider in the following way. Basically, first, you have to import the HTTP client from at angular/common/http. After importing it, you must inject it inside the constructor by creating a variable with a HTTP client type. Basically, after you created a variable inside the constructor, it is automatically injected because of the Angular's dependency injection system. In this example, the HTTP client is defined as a provider by importing it from at Angular common HTTP and specifying it as a constructor parameter in the data service. The at injectable decorator is used to tell Angular that this class can be injected as a dependency. The framework provides several ways to define providers, including using the provided in property to define a provider at the module level, using the providers array in a component or service decorator and using the use value, use class, or use existing properties to provide a specific implementation for a dependency. By using dependency injection in Angular, you can easily manage dependencies between objects, make your code more modular, and improve the testability of your application. And here is another example on how to use dependency injection in real-life Angular applications. Suppose you have an e-commerce application that needs to manage user authentication. You can create an auth service to handle the user authentication and authorization. The auth service needs to make HTTP requests to the server to authenticate the user. Here's how you can implement the auth user using dependency injection in Angular. First, we need to import the HTTP client from the Angular common. Then we will uh, we will inject the HTTP client in our constructor by creating a variable HTTP and then putting HTTP client as its data type. We will create a method login with parameters username and password. Then we will return the HTTP request wherein it's post with with respect or with respect to the API that you're gonna use for your login, that will automatically read your username and password um and check if the username and password is existing to your website. And then we're gonna also create a logout button that will return the API call for the logout and check and create a is authenticated method which has the type of boolean and check if the user is authenticated. If it is authenticated, then it will return true. Then on the right side of our PowerPoint or presentation, you can use the auth service in our Angular component as follows. In our component, we basically have a HTML template used, and then inside our login component, we injected the auth service class that we created, and then we used the auth service um, variable so that we can access the login method from our service class, and then it's gonna be deployed into our component. Then our component is gonna use that service in order to confirm that the username and the password is existing to the database. Um, that's all for the dependency injection and for the services. In our next lecture, I will show you how to use the services and the dependency injection. Thank you.